Hello there folks, back again for another video. In this one we had a brand new article pop up this week in what seems to be a series of articles this week looking at the key changes to the new edition of the Middle-earth strategy battle game, and I thought I'd just go through it and enlighten you to what they've been talking about, and then you can go and have a read for it yourself and see what you think as well, because it's always interesting seeing what Games Workshop are putting together for their games, and also maybe this will be an interesting look at this for you and some of my opinions as well. So I just wanted to quickly draw attention to this particular image that was the first one that popped up as part of the blog post, where we actually see Haleth and Hamar alongside those loyalist Rohan warriors, and on the other side you've got Wolf and Targ and Thorn there with some of those sort of usurper Rohirrim waiting in the wings to take down Helm and his kin. Gives you an idea of the kind of paint schemes that you're going to be looking at, and also the way that they're going to be represented in the movie as well. So that was just a nice little tidbit there. And if you're looking to build yourself an interesting sort of Rohan force based around Thorn, then now you've got an idea of the kind of way that you want to paint your miniatures. Maybe if you've got some of the old plastics lying around, you could start testing out schemes to see if you could get together a really nice red and white and black scheme for your Rohirrim soldiers. But I am fiercely loyal to the men of Rohan and Helm Hammerhand, so I will not be doing that, at least not yet anyway. But yeah, so that was just a fun little snippet there that I assume will probably pop up in the rulebook or something later on down the line, but there we go. Yes, moving on to the important things. So they talked about reworking a lot of mechanics for the new edition of the game, and not necessarily massively overhauling the key nature of the way that Middle-earth strategy battle game plays, but inherently making it a lot easier for you to dive in and get a hold of exactly how things work and the descriptive language behind it and that kind of stuff, to kind of avoid a lot of the vagaries that sometimes you can get in war games. And I think for the most part, Games Workshop did a fairly good job of that already with the Middle-earth strategy battle game. I think everything was fairly on the level, and you could kind of work out exactly what was meant by a particular rule. But better wording is always interesting, as long as it doesn't get massively bloated. Either way, they decided to dive in and show off a couple of new profiles. One for Aragorn, one for Brago, and one for a Minas Tirith warrior as well. And we're just going to go through these and we'll talk a little bit about them and sort of what they've done with them as well. So if we go to the profile for Aragorn and Strider here, you can see move value still the same there, 6. His fight value and has been sort of switched out from the ranged value and stuff in there and out as well now. So you've got a fight value of 7, which I think is quite good. And then as we go back to this, you'll see that they talk a little bit more about this in detail. So you have the shoot value now, so SV next to that one. So it's a 3+. Strength and defense, attacks, wounds, all pretty much similar as you'd expected. So strength 4, defense 5, attacks 3, wounds 3. And then they've also changed around the way that courage and intelligence works now. Now it's a flat value of, for example, in this case, 4+ for courage and 3+ for intelligence. This kind of takes out the additional bit of maths, I guess you'd have to do if you were looking to roll your dice and add your courage value. Instead, they've kind of taken the maths that would have been involved with courage and intelligence and then just made it a binary target that you're trying to hit effectively, which I think is a lot better in the long run for those people who are diving in to play the game for the first time. They just see that and think, well, I have to roll a 4+. I don't have to add something, etc. when I'm putting together my rolls. We also then have, same as always, might, will, and fate. Might there for modifying dice rolls, same as will, and also for denying special abilities, and then also fate there as well to save you when the wounds start coming through when you get attacked by lurts, for example. We also have a breakdown underneath of different elements to do with the character. So you have their race listed there, so man in this case, factions, fellowship, and Dunedain. So those are the factions that Aragorn can fight for, I would assume. Especially in the Strider form. I would assume that Aragorn or LSR for Minas Tirith will have different faction keywords there. Then we've got unit type, hero, infantry, and unique. So just some key types there that'll ping off particular abilities. I would say, and then their base size, so there's no vagaries on that front as well. And then you have a list of the heroic actions. That's something that's not changed from last edition. You still have all of those there. There is a little bit of additional stuff there on the war gear and the fact that it's a passive rather than an active ability, which again carries over from last edition. So you've got the rules for the Ring of Barahir there, which is able to deny magical powers as they come in, which is quite cool. And then we have a little bit more on Andúril, Flame of the West. So if you choose to arm Aragorn with Andúril, then you'll get to the abilities that you see there. So this is a unique elven hand and a half sword weapon. Whenever Aragorn makes strikes with Andúril, he never requires more than a 4+ from rolling to wound. If Aragorn uses Andúril as a two-handed weapon, then he still gets the bonus of +1 when rolling to wound, meaning you roll on a 3+, which is pretty good. And then again, you have special rules there, which will be included in a different section of the rulebook for Horse Lord, Mighty Hero, and Resistant to Magic, which is on top of already having Ring of Barahir, which is quite cool. But you'll also see that these are options for Aragorn, which will be interesting once we get to the Minas Tirith warrior, the Gondorian warrior, to see how that kind of pins out. But yeah, as you can see, 160 points for Aragorn. He can have 40 points to have Andúril, Flame of the West on him. 20 points for Brago. You can give him armor to boost his defense. Give him a bow and an elven cloak as well, which will all have their own special rules, of course. But a pretty standard set of rules and things for Aragorn, but a little bit more in depth to make sure that he kind of plays a little bit like the character from the movies and the books, which is always nice to see. We also got to see that Brago, his horse, has their own sort of set of stats as well, which is quite cool. So you've got the move there, the fight value, and the shoot value for what it's worth, strength, defense, attacks, wounds, and then courage and intelligence, which might come up. And then you've got horse, sea rider, mount, and then 40mm. So when you mount Aragorn on Brago, there we go. And then he also has an active special rule now, which is tied to Brago, which I think is quite nice. So if Aragorn will be knocked prone while riding Brago, and Brago is not slain as a result of the effect causing Aragorn to be knocked prone, then before becoming a separated mount, Aragorn may roll a d6. On a 6, Aragorn is not knocked prone and stays mounted upon Brago. Aragorn may use might to improve this roll. So a pretty awesome bonus there, especially for Aragorn, who is already a horse lord, which is quite nice. Good to see that sort of mixed in there to kind of help build up the options and the flavour behind particular characters and also their mounts, of course. And in this case, I think this is a very good look at the kind of language that Games Workshop want to be using when it comes to the game now. So with Brago here, for example, we're getting a lot more of that kind of... I wouldn't say it goes as far as to be legalese, but it's written in very much a you cannot get this wrong manner, which is obviously good for idiots like myself who read through rules and maybe half read them, when in fact you could just read the whole thing and it will tell you everything you need to know about how a particular rule works on the tabletop, which is always handy. But yeah, so that was a little bit of a breakdown of sort of how Aragorn works and sort of giving you an idea of a stat block as well, which is always important. And again, as you can see here, it's all there done to effectively remove the confusion for players. And as you can see here about the courage thing, which I think was quite interesting. So in the previous edition, miniatures with courage 6, which is Aragorn, are likely to be courage plus 4+. So that kind of factors in to the way that it would have worked. And as you can see, they've bumped up and changed the character in different ways as well to try and make it so that it's a little easier for you to kind of represent heroic characters on the tabletop. I also liked that they've changed the banding for fight values. So rather than a lot of them falling into that 3 to 6, they've kind of spread things out a bit, which I think makes a lot of sense. And it kind of means that your heroic characters will end up feeling heroic rather than feeling like they're going toe-to-toe with sort of like some nameless hero or something, and not necessarily fighting as well as they should have done in those close duels. We also got a look at the warrior profile. So I believe this is this one here, yeah. So this is a warrior of Minas Tirith, and we'll see how this one works. So 8 points per model, as you can see there. Again, same thing. So move 6 inches, fight value of 4+, shoot value of 4+, strength 3, defense 5. That's obviously baked into the fact that it's wearing the heavy armor and the hand weapon. The attacks 1, wounds 1, courage of 7+, and an intelligence of 7+. Just for those people who don't who aren't aware, intelligence is being used as a way to deal with certain mechanics in the game that might fall out of the realms of a courage test. So if you're trying to spot a ring bearer or dig up treasure or hurl a rock, I think is the example they use in the Warhammer community article, that's where intelligence comes in as a new stat. So it's just there to kind of deal with those kind of more scenario-specific abilities and effects and mechanics, but also just makes sense, I think, as well, and it doesn't clutter things up too much, I don't think. And because it's just a plus that you're looking for on the dice, nice and easy for you to learn. The one thing that this actually delves into is a little bit more of the way in which particular units will then take their equipment, and then how that kind of comes together to building your warbands and stuff. So now it's a warrior of Minas Tirith must have one of the following options for the listed points cost, and it's one of the following. So they can either have a warhorn and shield, a banner, a shield and spear, a bow, or a shield. So effectively you're looking at a very broken down, easy to get your head around set of rules there for equipping your Warriors of Minas Tirith and building your warband up very, very quickly. Simply, if you want to turn them into a Spearman of Gondor, then you just pay the 2 points to turn them into with the spear and the shield. If you just want to turn them into a regular hand weapon shield boyo, then you just buy the shield. If you want to give them a bow, you give them a bow, etc., etc. The banner and obviously the warhorn and shield, they all tie back into the heavy armor and the hand weapon anyway, so they're not going to be running around just swinging their fists around, which I think makes a lot of sense. And they did say that while some units will have the must and one sort of attached to their profile, some may have or they may also include sort of like can have up to 2 or something like that from their profile. So I'm sure we'll see a little bit more of that as we go through the different profiles when they're doing new edition lands, but that kind of gives you an indicator of how they're going to be working with Warriors of Minas Tirith in the near future, and of course other warriors for different factions as well. Here you can see Man, Gondor, Warrior Infantry, 25mm base, and going back to the faction again, Gondor there, so I'd assume it's any army that includes Gondor as its faction title will be the one that you can attach it to. And it'll be interesting to see if there's then sub-armies beneath that, a little bit like the way that they've done Legendary Legions in the past. So maybe there's kind of like an Osgiliath Veterans one, which is Osgiliath Veterans, brackets Gondor, or maybe like Defenders of the White City, brackets Gondor, or something like that. I suppose we'll have to wait and see to see how that all comes together. But yeah, so an interesting bit, a little bit of information there about the way that the Warriors of Minas Tirith work on the tabletop as well. And again, they talk about this in more detail here as well, so if you want to dive in and read it for yourself, you can do that. And as you can see there, that's a little breakdown of how intelligence characteristics works. So it's 2d6, looking to equal or beat the value shown, a little bit like with courage. There we go. They also talked about the changes to the priority roll. So this one was quite interesting. So the biggest change in the edition is the way that the priority roll works. So previous to this, as they say here, whoever won the priority roll would just go first. But that could also mean that you're putting yourself at a disadvantage. And so what they've said now is that if you win the priority roll, then you choose to take priority or give it to your opponent. So if you feel like them moving would be more beneficial before you start to move and sort of countering them, then now that's an important part of the game and sort of how you think about things tactically. So that will be really fascinating, obviously, in match play, but also could be really interesting in the way that narrative scenarios play out as well. And I quite like the idea of sort of slower armies, maybe not opting to necessarily go first in the turn, to kind of see where the enemy starts to move and then react to that, rather than it being the other way around, because obviously a faster army can just dodge out of the way of you and get around you and sort of move off in different locations to kind of like sort of play around with your movement and stuff. So that's an interesting little bit of a twist there in the way that it all works. The other thing they talked about is that kind of clear and consistent wording that I've also been mentioning earlier. And again, I think you can see that very much so in the way that they've kind of represented the power dominate here. So if we have a look at this in more detail. So as you can see, that is like a significant chunk of text to explain the ability, but in a way that you can't then misinterpret, would be the hope anyway from Games Workshop. So this model counts as a number of models as shown in brackets when working out how many models are in range of an objective in a specific area of the board, or when working out how many models have escaped the battlefield. So a model with Dominate 3 would count as 3 models in range of an objective or in a specific area of the board, or 3 models when working out how many models have escaped the battlefield. If a model would gain this special rule while in range of another model or specific area of the board and then moves off the board, they will not gain the benefit of this special rule once off the board. If a model has 2 sources of Dominate X special rule, then they use the highest value. So again, they've kind of approached this from the idea of it being a little legalese, making sure it's as clear as day exactly how the rule works, so you can't misinterpret it. And obviously, Games Workshop are kind of hit and miss, I suppose you'd say, with this kind of thing in the past for other rules for Warhammer 40,000 and Age of Sigmar. But I think in general, Middle-earth strategy battle game has always kind of been okay, and I think the community around Middle-earth strategy battle game has always been okay with the way that they sort of explain and work out rules, and they see the intention rather than trying to game it so much. Obviously, as someone who's not necessarily taking part in massive amounts of tournaments, I don't necessarily see how deep that goes. Maybe it's something that does pop up quite a lot, but as more of a casual player and a collector, I think it's good to have that kind of clarity there when you're reading through the rules. They also talked about a couple of additional things here for different tweaks. So match play scenarios have been rebalanced to go all the way up to 20 victory points for a greater spread of scores. And there's also been tweaks to things like brutal power attacks, magical powers, and other special rules as well. Again, really interesting little bit of an article here. There is going to be a second part which talks about army building and a couple of teasers of the different army lists that they're going to be working on for the game as well. I'm really fascinated to see how that works, because warband building, I think, was really interesting in the last edition, and I really enjoyed how it worked. I thought it made a lot of sense. It'll be interesting to see how the new rules are necessarily more restrictive, perhaps, than they have been in the past. So you can't mix and match quite as much, potentially, to kind of keep it sort of book or movie accurate. But then again, I'd really love to see them tweaking with things and playing around with Legendary Legions in order to make some interesting thematic armies, and also give people the freedom. Obviously, there's no reason, because the game is yours once it's in your hands, there's no reason why you can't break all of these rules and just start building whatever the hell you want. If you're playing with friends anyway, there's nothing to say you can't do that. So you could have Aragorn running around with the Wood Elves in LotR, for example, if you really wanted to. There's nothing to say you nothing to stop you doing that if you wanted to put together a fun little scenario or something like that. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it works in terms of match play and everything like that, and your typical games, your typical skirmishes in Middle-earth, and the world of Lord of the Rings, War of the Rohirrim, and The Hobbit. But yeah, make sure to come and have a look at this article, give it a little bit of a digest, have a read, see what you think. Are you impressed with the kind of way that they're taking profiles now and the way they're changing things up? Obviously, we're no stranger to these profiles now. If you know where to look on Reddit and stuff, you'll have found some leaks and things, I'm sure of it. But it's just interesting to me to see kind of how Games Workshop are talking about the game and how the designers are talking about the game, and sort of where they look to take it in the future, and the justifications for changes as well is always fascinating. Obviously, a lot of people can make decisions that Games Workshop have done something because they are in hock to people who own the license and all that kind of thing, but I also think genuinely that the design team behind the Middle-earth strategy battle game tend to be like really in love with the product that they're bringing to the tabletop, and they don't tend to do things that feel corporate, if you know what I mean. It all feels like it's done from a place of kind of like genuine passion for the game, which I think is incredibly important for something like Lord of the Rings, which is a passion project for a very, very great many wargamers, hobbyists, and collectors. I could be wrong. I could eat humble pie when the rules come out and they're all terrible, but we will have to wait and see, I suppose. For now, though, interesting little bit of a look at what they're planning for reworks to the mechanics. Can't wait to get my hands on the rules themselves later on down the line. But for now, please let me know what you think in the comments down below. Do you like the new changes? What do you think about what we've seen so far, be it here or through the leaks or whatever? And yeah, make sure to like, share, comment, and do all that good stuff. And I'll talk to you folks very, very soon about more Middle-earth stuff, including army list building, which will come out later in the week. So yes, I'll be back to talk about that very, very soon indeed. Bye for now.